Welcome, everyone, to our Gut Rules Masterclass. My name is Brian Mariani, and I am the son of Russell Mariani and Megan Moore. They are the founders of the Center for Functional Nutrition, and my dad has been in this line of work professionally since 1980, and my mom has been running the show and making this all possible for decade after decade. And we're very grateful that you are all here with us this evening. Depending on where you are in the world or the country, here on the East Coast, it's 8 p.m. This is being recorded, so you may be viewing this at some other time or certainly some other place. And tonight is a very special masterclass. For those of you who were here last time, we really focused on the annual colon cleanse. Russell brought some incredible data, some current findings that he's been looking at, and also, as many of you know, or maybe you're here for the first time, Russell really looks at principles that are not just found out today, but principles of health that have been serving people for generation after generation. And his exceptional talent and passion is to create ways for us all to learn and understand and ultimately implement to get the best results, the principles that he has seen serve not only himself, his family, but his clients directly and many thousands of people through his books and through opportunities like this where he gets to share with all of us. So I know that today is really a colon cleanse part two. This is a very, very popular topic, and Russell's going to share some stories tonight. He is going to, of course, take questions as always. And so we do just want to share a couple of things here at the beginning. Number one, anything that you do hear from Russell tonight, this is an educational opportunity. So he is in no way, shape, or form giving any kind of medical advice. We do offer his ebook, totally complimentary. There will be a link in the chat that I will put. You're welcome to download that if you don't already have it. Russell also offers a complimentary 30-minute one-on-one conversation with him directly. That again is totally free, complimentary. If you haven't done that, I highly, highly recommend it. That link will also go into the chat. And as we get into tonight's conversation, again, if you do have any questions, you can put them in the chat for us all to see. You could also message me privately, and I will do my very best to get to all of those questions. So without further ado, Russell, go ahead.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for that great introduction. And thanks for hosting as always, month after month. Appreciate you doing that, keeping it all in the family here. And thank you, Megan, for all that you do behind the scenes. And now finally that your camera's fixed in front of the scenes. And thank you, each and every one of you, for being here tonight. I know everyone has busy lives and you got all kinds of options. So to take an hour of your time and spend that with us and listen to what I have to share, I deeply appreciate it. And speaking of listening, in preparing for tonight's session, and I'll be sharing some interesting testimonials in a few minutes, I really was reflecting deeply on what Brian referred to as, there's certain principles that have stood the test of time in helping people to heal themselves, teaching people how to heal themselves. That first principle I always talk about is that the body is genetically programmed to heal itself in spite of current circumstances or appearances or symptoms. Every cell of our body is literally programmed to function normally. The only question is whether or not you know how to cooperate with those self-healing capabilities. And cooperation looks like knowing the difference between what I call complementary and insulting habits, especially in the area of breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, supplements, sleep and rest. These are all fundamental things. So, and in preparation for tonight, I was talking earlier with Megan and Brian, and they were encouraging me to talk about the special skills that I've developed over the years that allows me to work with a wide variety of people, a wide variety of conditions and circumstances and symptoms and ages and ethnic backgrounds, and yet use the same basic approach with everyone. And to me, that's the result of understanding principles of physiology, principles of healing, and principles of human behavior. And so I just wanted to share that probably what sets me apart from a lot of other practitioners and teachers is that at a very early age in my career, I learned that the most important thing was listening. And not just listening in a conversation, but listening to what's going on in somebody's body. What are those symptoms saying? Where is the problem? What are the organs and systems that are crying out for help? And so I just wanted to say that at the outset. It's probably the thing that I rely on the most. Anyone can make recommendations. Yes, you should eat whole foods. Yes, you should be hydrated. Yes, you should take probiotics. Yes, you should try this supplement or that. Or yes, you should do a colon cleanse. It's easy to say those things, and it's quite a different thing to be sitting with someone one on one and then have them tell you their history, their medical history, their dietary history, and then begin to see how I can begin to guide that person through a process that's going to help them restore their health and well-being, help them restore, in particular, normal functioning to their digestive system. Which brings us back to tonight's topic, the annual colon cleanse part two. So I'm not going to go into the details of how that colon cleanse works. I went into those details in the last session, which was March 17th. So you can access that recording if you'd like to see that. What I wanted to do tonight was to answer the three questions that were in the flyer and then share a few memorable testimonials from the last 30 or 40 years or so, maybe even go all the way back 50 years, and then open it up for questions. So the first question was on the flyer, why is colon cleansing necessary and not optional? And the short answer is because the digestive system affects everything. The intestinal microbiome affects everything. It affects every other organ and system and cell. And if that intestinal microbiome, if that internal ecosystem that we call the microbiome is not healthy, is not in balance, then you can have a very long list of other problems, other symptoms, other conditions, and often it will be overlooked that the cause is in your gut. And so colon cleansing is just the kind of shorthand, an abbreviation for what really is going on. The physical removal of trapped fecal matter, which is generally what people think of when they think of a colon cleanse, the removal of bad organisms and the toxins that they produce, that's all part of the cleanse, but that's only one part of the process because the most important part of the process is the restoration of that microbiome. And you can the simplest analogy is the microbiome is an ecosystem and it's a garden. And when you have dysbiosis, when you have problems with the microbiome, it's because weeds have taken over the garden. And so, as any good gardener knows, you first have to remove the weeds, and then you have to fertilize the soil. You have to enrich the soil. You have to strengthen the soil. And then when you do that, the garden is ready to then grow whatever it is that you want the garden to grow. Flowers or vegetables or fruit trees, doesn't matter. So it's the same thing in our body. It's the same thing in our system. So then the next question was, well, how can you be sure it's time for your colon cleanse? Or in the context of our masterclass, how can you be sure it's time for your annual colon cleanse? And again, the short answer to that question is sometimes it's obvious, but many times it's not. And so the answer is you can't be sure when it's time to do your colon cleanse. Therefore, you want to make sure you do it at least once a year. And you want to put it on the calendar. And you want to make sure that nothing gets in the way of your doing that at least once a year. Sometimes, with some people, due to certain circumstances, it becomes necessary to do it more than once a year. Okay. So again, I'll leave it at that for the reasons I've already gone over. You want to make sure that the weeds aren't taking over your garden. So you can talk to any gardener anywhere in the world, and one of the daily tasks while the garden is growing is weeding, whether it's every day or every week or every other week. And so you can think of the colon cleanse. You don't have to do it every week, obviously, but it's a way to make sure that the weeds are not taking over the garden. Okay. And then the last bullet point on the flyer was, what are some of the most memorable cleanse experiences or colon cleanse experiences that I would like to share, looking back over the last 46 years or so. And so I went through my book and I went on our website and I looked at all the testimonials there. And then I went to my computer where I have hundreds of testimonials that people have provided, after I worked with them one-on-one. So I just wanted to share a few, and then I'll preface it by saying that each one of the stories that I'm going to share with you next basically went through the very same process. Now, everyone's different, and there are subtle changes in everyone's program or everyone's process, but the basic steps are the same with everyone. Everyone has to learn the difference between complementary and insulting habits. Everyone has to be properly hydrated. Everyone has to address micronutrient deficiencies. Everyone has to learn what a balanced diet is. What is the best balance or proportion of the different food groups for you, for each person, because it's different for every person. And then addressing dysbiosis, pulling the weeds, making a healthy garden, learning what foods and activities and habits, excuse me, cause inflammation, which is oxidative stress, because that's very important. Almost all chronic conditions are caused by inflammation, which is caused by oxidative stress. And then, as many of you know, the seventh root cause area is redox signaling. And I talk about that in my book. I talk about that on the website. And we've talked about that on different masterclass sessions. So, one of the most memorable experiences I've had in this work was with a young lady named Brittany. Her story is in my book and on our website. She was 19 years old when her mother found me on the internet one night way back in 2004. And her mom literally stayed up all night searching the internet for a solution because her daughter that earlier that day had been told by her GI doctor, who was also a GI surgeon, that her colon was no longer working at all. And that there was no choice. She had no choice. She was going to have 2 feet of her colon removed. And the young lady, Brittany, had tried everything for over a year and a half, and nothing had worked. So she actually said yes to the surgeon because he promised that she would finally be out of pain. But her mom knew that there had to be a better option. And so that morning, I got a phone call from Brittany's mom. And that afternoon, we had a first step free conversation with Brittany and her mom. And after a couple of days of going back and forth, they decided that they would let me guide them through this process. And it took about a week to get everything in order. And then we started down the road of this process. And some of you know from either reading the book or hearing me talk about the herbal formulas that we use in this process. And Brittany needed 15 capsules of intestinal formula number one, which at the time was a record, but and being hydrated and eating certain foods and taking probiotics, doing all of the other things. And she started to have normal bowel movements. And then for the next 3 or 4 weeks, she had 3 or 4 or 5 sizable bowel movements every day. And finally, everything was cleaned out, and she had no pain, literally after 2 or 3 days into this process. No pain, no cramping, and bowel movements for the first time in over a year and a half. And then about a month later, her mom sent me a beautiful, or 2 months later, sent me a beautiful testimonial, sent me a beautiful letter. She didn't intend it to be a testimonial, letting me know that not only was Brittany having normal bowel movements, but her whole energy had changed. Her complexion came back. She had color in her face. She was happy again. She was smiling. And her mom wanted me to know that 2 months from then, she was getting married. And so, of course, I heard about the wedding and they shared photos and stories. And so that was a great story. Um, I wanted to mention another story because this is a very common experience. People have heard this term diverticulitis. Some very high percentage of the US population gets diverticulitis, uh, every year, like hundreds of thousands of people. It's one of the most common reasons that people go to the emergency room at the hospital. And so back in 2015, I got a call one day from a woman named Carol Patty, and I believe she's on the Zoom tonight. And Carol is a health educator and nutritionist in New York City. And she called me because she had just gotten a call from a friend of hers who was in the hospital out of the blue because she had just been diagnosed with diverticulitis. And in a similar way to Brittany, had just been told that her colon was filled with trapped fecal matter and it wasn't moving, and she needed to have surgery within the next week or two. And this woman, whose first name is Liz, and again, her story is on the website, said, "How is that possible? Everything was perfectly normal and fine a couple of months ago." Anyway, she went through this same process that Brittany had gone through several years earlier, and that I take everybody through, whether their problem is constipation or diverticulitis or colitis or ulcerative colitis. Things get adjusted, but the process is very similar. Well, Liz went through this process, and 1 week later, she was feeling much better, pain-free, started to have normal bowel movements. 6 weeks later, she had lost 30 pounds. And we estimate that most of that 30 pounds was the fecal matter trapped in her colon. Now this was an unbelievable story. At the end of that time, of course, we were all celebrating, and we sent her back to her original GI surgeon because that was the deal. We would walk her through this process. If she had another attack of diverticulitis during the process, she would go to the hospital. And the original GI doctor refused to take new x-rays. We wanted to have new x-rays so that he could see and tell her in person, you don't need surgery, your colon is clear. Well, her original GI surgeon refused to take new x-rays. He said, look, I've been doing this for 30 years and the x-rays are going to be the same. I'm making my decision based on the original x-rays. Well, Liz couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. So it took her about a month to find another GI doctor who would agree, after talking to me, after talking to Liz, to take x-rays. And of course, the good news is he showed her the x-rays and he said, your colon is completely empty. It's completely clean. Absolutely, you don't need surgery. So again, that's another wonderful story. And Liz was very deserving, as everyone is, to have a normally functioning digestive system. Um, so again, thank you, Carol Patty, for making the referral to Liz Burley. And then we put Liz's story up on the website. And then about 5 years later, a woman was searching the internet and came across Liz's story about diverticulitis because she had just had an episode of diverticulitis, and her name was Shannon. And Shannon had an amazing story. She had a different type of problem. It still ended up with diverticulitis, but she had loose, urgent, frequent bowel movements for 20 years. And when she started the program, 1 week later, she had normal bowel movements, and those normal bowel movements continued probably to the current day. Okay? So this approach, this process is good and effective, safe and effective, no matter what the diagnosed condition is, no matter what name is given to the condition, and no matter what the symptoms are. Um, Let me do a time check here. Oh my gosh, 8:25. Okay, so I think everybody has heard me tell the story of my dad, so I won't tell that whole story, but my dad at age 99 had diverticulosis. And I took him through this whole process. He was told, my brother took him to the hospital because he was in a lot of pain. And in the hospital, they told my brother that your dad probably has advanced prostate cancer, and because of his age, they will not operate. And so take him home, keep him comfortable, and say goodbye. True story. So my brother called me. We were in Canada at the time. My brother and father and sister and other brother live in New Jersey. My brother told me what the doctor had just said to him. And I said, his name is Billy. I said, Billy, go back and ask that same doctor if, or to look at the x rays again, and if my dad had trapped fecal matter in his colon. At first, the doctor refused to look at the x ray again, but my brother insisted, and so he told him, yes, he has a lot of trapped fecal matter. So we brought him home, and I drove down from Canada to New Jersey the next day, started him on this very same process, and within a few days, everything was flowing. And my dad is now, so this happened when my dad was 99, and in September, he'll turn 103. And Megan and I were visiting him just 2 weekends ago, and he's doing quite well. And he is very independent, and he uses the bathroom on his own at 102 and a half. So that was my oldest client, and then I wanted to end this section by sharing a brief story about my youngest client, who was a young lady, and I won't say her name, but I will call her Emily. Emily was 3 years old, and she had a medical treatment that caused serious injury to her body, and the doctors didn't know where the injury was. But the result of the injury was open sores covering about 60% of her little body. And when I learned about the medication that had been given to her, I looked it up on the internet. And one of the side effects of that particular medication was uh, inflammatory bowel, leading possibly to a condition called leaky gut syndrome. So it made sense to me that this is what had happened, that the medication had caused serious inflammation, not normal inflammation, very serious inflammation. That inflammation then led to openings, holes, literally holes in the intestinal lining, and toxins from the colon were leaking out into her blood stream and then trying to get out of her body through her skin. I took that little girl and her mom guided her through the process. So obviously, I talked to her mom. I did talk to the little girl 2 or 3 times during the process. She called the intestinal formula number two. Those of you who are familiar with the intestinal formula number two has many ingredients in it. One of the ingredients is activated charcoal. So it is black or dark gray. And when you take enough of it, it can turn the bowel movements very dark. She called the intestinal formula number two the black medicine. And this little girl, to her credit, did everything that I asked her to do and did everything that an adult would do. In other words, there isn't like a child version of the program. She did the water cure. She ate the same food. She took the same supplements and she took the same herbs, one of which she called the black medicine. And it took several weeks. It was probably not until the third or fourth week. But finally, those terrible sores, the poor little kid was in such pain all the time. Couldn't go outside, was just lying around in bed all the time. They finally started closing. And I have photographs, before, during, and after photographs of this incredible process. It took about 5 months, but into the 5 month, all those sores had healed because the healing was happening inside her gut. The leaky gut had to be healed first. And once that happened, then the toxins were no longer streaming out into her body and then through her skin. So that was another very dramatic experience. Uh, and that little girl is now, I think, 16 or 17 years old. and she's a very happy, beautiful young lady. Okay, Brian, so I think I will stop there with sharing stories, and we can turn it back over to you and see if we have any questions from our class who have gathered here tonight with us.
Awesome. Thank you. It's always amazing hearing the testimonials of people over the years. And those are certainly some highlights. And thank you everyone for sending me messages. Like I said, I will do my best to get to all of them. And if anyone has any more, please keep them coming. And again, you could send them privately to me or just put them in the main chat. Okay. So, first question here is okay. So, what happens exactly to the gut during a colon cleanse that doesn't happen through daily healthy habits alone?
Great question. Very important question. Maybe it's we used to say the $1 million question. Actually, when I was a kid, some of you will know because you probably saw the same program. We used to say the $64,000 question. Then it went to a million, then it went to billion. Now you probably have to say the $1 trillion question. So the answer is when the microbiome is out of balance, when there is an overgrowth of the wrong organisms, when the weeds have taken over the garden, they will not let go. And so, even if you eat a better diet, even if you take probiotics, even if you take other important foods or juices or all kinds of things, that garden doesn't self repair through those changes. The only way, or the only way I have found, is to begin a process of pulling out the weeds, and that requires the use of these very specialized herbal products. I mentioned the intestinal formula number two, the black medicine that this little girl, Emily, referred to it as. That is a very amazing product that the way I describe it to people is you have to take a lot of it, like 10 capsules 4 or 5 times a day, and each dose would be equivalent to like a heaping tablespoon, possibly even 2 heaping tablespoons, that when mixed with water and your digestive juices forms a thick, soft, gelatinous blob that literally fills up the entire space of your small intestine and the entire space of your large intestine when it gets down there. And as it's moving through, I mentioned one of the ingredients is activated charcoal. Another ingredient is bentonite clay. There are many other ingredients, but the bentonite clay is this incredible absorber of toxins. So as this blob is moving through your system, it's killing the bad organisms and it's starting to literally vacuum out, pull out of your system the trapped fecal matter and these terrible organisms. Now, while you're doing that, it doesn't happen overnight. It takes 3, 4, 5, sometimes 6 weeks to complete that process. While we're pulling out the weeds, we are making sure that the only things that are going into the garden are really good quality water, lots of good sunshine, the correct type of fertilizer, the correct type of food, prebiotics, probiotics, digestive enzymes, superfood supplements. Those are the only things that are going into the system. So that at the end of that process of pulling out all the bad stuff, your new internal garden has an opportunity to grow very quickly and very comprehensively. So There are other methods that I read about and hear about on the internet, including what's it called? A fecal transplant. Okay, where literally the healthy microbiome is harvested from a healthy person and put into capsules and given to another person with an unhealthy microbiome. And I've read enough stories to know that in some situations that has worked, but I have not seen that work in a situation where there's a lot of trapped fecal matter. Because if you can't remove that trapped fecal matter, there's no way that you can grow that new garden. So that's probably a long answer, but that's the reason. When the garden is taken over with weeds, you can't you have to get rid of the weeds before you can grow the new garden. So these conditions just don't respond to being hydrated or eating good food or taking good supplements. I'll leave it there. And I know this is true because most of the people I work with have tried, sometimes for years, other approaches, other diets, lots of supplements, and it maybe made a little difference, but it did not ever get them to the place where they wanted to be, which was completely normal functioning, where they didn't have to be so careful all the time of what they were eating. Okay, Brian, sorry.
Awesome. I'm gonna combine a couple questions because they kind of all are on the same path. And basically, there's a lot of cleanses out there, a lot of colon cleanses that have like timelines. And obviously, you have a way of doing your colon cleanse, but for someone that was doing a colon cleanse with you and what you've seen over a long history, are there indicate are there indicators that you see over and over that like someone has completed a colon cleanse, like a positive indicator that it has worked and you can kind of go back to your daily healthy habits?
Yeah, so again, that's a good question, or combining several questions. If someone has never done the kind of colon cleanse that I recommend, literally their whole life, then for me, it's a minimum of 4 bottles of this specialized herbal product we call intestinal formula number 2, along with everything else. And that's going to take a minimum of 4 weeks to complete that, and sometimes 5 or 6 weeks. And I know that's true because Liz back in 2015 was someone who you couldn't get a more, actually Brittany back in 2004, to be safe. She was she was someone who I made sure had at least 4 containers of the formula number 2 through her system. And again, it was determined medically that her colon was clean, and then years later, it was determined through X-rays that Liz's system was totally clean. Now, I do not require anybody to go and get X-rays or CT scans or anything like that. People have done this on their own and have gotten very good news after, completing this cleanse. Um, so part of it is just for me, there's a minimum amount of time and a minimum amount of certain formulas that need to go through a person's system. So that's one piece of the puzzle. But the other piece is, are they feeling better? You can't have success if somebody is still feeling cramping or bloating or distension or any negative symptom. So once the person is saying, "Oh, I feel so much better," and they're producing normal bowel movements at a normal rate, which is 1 or 2 or 3 a day, based on other factors like how much you're eating and your age and things like that. So So it's part of it is a mechanical knowing that uh, certain products need to be put through a person's system a certain amount in a certain amount of time. And then but the rest of it really depends on that person. And no one has completed the process and told me that they feel great and they're having normal bowel movements. And then on their own, they want to go back to the GI doctor and get a CT scan or get an abdominal x-ray. Uh, no one has ever done that, feeling great and having normal activity, and told by the doctor, well, we're delighted to hear that you feel great, but you still have 20 pounds of trapped fecal matter in your system. Just doesn't happen that way. So I guess that's how I'll answer that one.
Awesome. And this is a good one. Are there any risks to doing a colon cleanse incorrectly?
Yes. uh, and this is, I wrote my book in 2006 partly to make it possible for people to do this on their own. And of course, it's still possible for people to do it on their own, and people do, and they buy the book, read the book, order the products on their own, go through the process on their own, and then write to us and let us know that they've done it successfully. But that's few and far between, honestly. And partly because there are many moving parts to the process. It's not, even though the colon cleanse itself is relatively simple in terms of, the products that are used and, the sequence in which they're used. But honestly, it's simple for me because I've done this once or twice a year for 30 years, and I've taken hundreds of people through the process. So I don't think I realized how um, unique that experience is. And so it really is challenging for people to do this on their own. And it is easy to make a mistake and take too much of this or too little of that. And so, honestly, at this point, I mean, we did a video series to try to make it even more effective in allowing somebody on their own. But if you have serious discomfort and you have been diagnosed with a serious chronic, inflammatory condition or serious constipation or colonic inertia or gastroparesis or any named condition in the spectrum of digestive system disorders, it really is the safest way to do this is to just contact me directly and let me guide you through the process one on one.
Okay, and then again, I'm going to combine just a few questions here. Essentially, there were a bunch of questions about symptoms like brain fog, fatigue, um, acne, various skin issues. How and why are those connected to, actually, this person used the word dirty colon. I thought that was an interesting way to say it. Can you explain how or why those are connected?
Yes, great question. Thank you for asking that question. So, the digestive system in general, and by the time the waste gets down to the colon in particular, 5 to 6 feet of colon or large intestine. The large intestine is the largest internal organ that we have for the elimination of waste. There's a lot of waste that gets produced through eating food and a lot of metabolic waste. The liver processes a lot of waste. It filters our blood, and all those waste products from the liver. get dumped into the intestine, at the top of the large intestine. And so most of the waste that the body generates on a daily basis comes through the intestines, comes through the large intestine. The second largest organ for the elimination of waste in the human body is the skin. And so, one of the best indications that your intestines are working really well, that your colon is working really well, is to have really healthy skin. And if you have any skin issues, from mild dermatitis or mild pimples or mild acne or mild rosacea or any eczema, psoriasis, all of those conditions are indications that the primary organ for the elimination of waste is not working very efficiently. And as I described in one of the stories with little Emily, she had an injury from a medication that caused intestinal permeability, also known as leaky gut syndrome. The wall of her intestines, which normally are tight, the medical term is literally tight junctures, because of the inflammation, developed gaps or holes. And so the toxins start leaking out from the intestines into the bloodstream, and then the body sends them out through the skin. So I think it was Brittany who I mentioned in her mother's letter to me, and this was commenting on how beautiful her skin was, even though it had only been 2 months since she started the process. And I can tell everybody here and everybody listening to the recording that the single uh, most reported benefit of doing this program, uh, next to the restoration of normal, bowel movement activity, is beautiful skin, clear skin. And so again, the one of the greatest ways to determine that your digestive system and your elimination system is working really well is to have really good, clear, healthy skin. So every skin problem under the sun is, generally speaking, not a dermatological problem. It's not confined to the skin. Its origin is in the gut. And that's one of the things that we said at the very beginning of tonight's session. In the world of functional medicine, which is the world that I'm working in, functional medicine, functional nutrition, no matter what the specialty is, diabetes or Alzheimer's or arthritis or any number of other chronic conditions, functional medical people are always taught and trained to fix the gut first. Because often by fixing the gut, you're either going to get complete restoration of that other condition or tremendous progress in improving all these other conditions. Okay, Brian, go ahead.
Awesome. I'm just gonna go to the group chat because there were two questions that came in to piggyback on what you were just sharing. One is, are the things that you do when you work with people, can they help with stomach ulcers? And then the second one was specifically with skin issues around the eyes. Can repairing the gut help with that as well?
Yes. The short answer is yes to both of those issues. Obviously, stomach ulcers, it's interesting. I mean, over 50 years of a career, I can only think of two or three people that came to me because they had stomach ulcers. I've had dozens and dozens and dozens of people come to me because of ulcers in their colon, and the cause of the ulcer is the same. It's a breakdown of the mucus lining of that organ. The stomach has a very thick mucus barrier protective lining. That's where the probiotics live, by the way. And so if that lining gets worn thin and the wall of the lining of the stomach or the wall of the lining of the colon gets exposed, an ulcer can form. So the answer is yes. It is the same basic approach to that is used no matter whether the problem is at the top of the digestive system or the very bottom of the digestive system. And yes, to the question about eyes, if the inflammation of the skin is around the eyes, same thing. And I've worked with many people who've had that, not just around their eyes, their whole face is completely inflamed. Yes.
You want to do it in May in a particular week?
Yeah, silence
Okay.
that that guest's audio. I don't know. Something's going on in May. Go ahead,
Um,
Brian.
so perfect. There are a bunch of questions, and I apologize. We never do get to absolutely everybody. Um, but please take advantage of booking with Russell directly. Totally complimentary, very easy. The link is here at the beginning of the chat, and I will certainly put it in again. Um, Again, this is being recorded. We will be sending out the recording to everybody. If you don't get it, I will put Megan's email in the chat right now. If you ever have any questions, please reach out directly. And Dad, do you have any kind of closing thoughts as we wrap up today?
I knew you were going to ask me that question. So, my closing thoughts are that the digestive system is arguably the most important system in the body. The number of bacterial organisms, single cell organisms that live in this ecosystem we call the microbiome are in the thousands of trillions, number wise. If we were to define the human body just by the number of cells, this microbiome ecosystem would be 90% of what we are. And that's part of the reason why it has such a dramatic impact on all the other organs and systems and cells. So it is in each of our best interest to learn about how to restore to health and vitality the intestinal microbiome, this incredible, magnificent ecosystem that lives inside our body. It is the key to health and well-being. And it's also the key to healthy longevity, as my dad can attest to. So thank you everybody for being here tonight. Really appreciate that you're here. I hope tonight was helpful. Hello, Willow. Oh my gosh, I just saw Willow Drinkwater. Hi there. And Phyllis Books, thank you for coming in tonight. Dr. Phyllis Books, thank you for being here. And Aaron, and Lorraine, and Martha Joe, and Evelyn, and Vaso. Hey, Vaso. Kathy, Laura. Oh, now I have to say everybody. Colleen, oh my gosh, Colleen is there. David, Gracie, April. Hope I didn't miss anybody. Thank you all, and thank you, Brian.
Thank you, everyone.